An Israeli F-35 Adir has just executed the platform's first ever air-to-air kill, deep inside Iranian airspace. The event is being analysed in real time by Air Force commanders and defence contractors from Washington to Beijing. And yet the dominant counter-narrative emerging is not one of celebration, but of indictment. According to Tucker Carlson, this is not an American victory. It is absolutely disgusting and evil. A strategic deception initiated by Benjamin Netanyahu in direct violation of the No More Foreign Wars mandate, with immense downstream costs, including surging energy prices that directly threaten your portfolio. This channel exists to decode how these tactical events expose cascading risks to your hard assets. To understand the full extent of this strategic deception, we must first clinically assess the official tactical victory itself. Let's be clear. On a purely tactical level, the operation was an unprecedented success. The "and" of our argument is that the official story is, in its technical dimension, entirely correct. On March 4, 2026, an Israeli F-35 Adir penetrated the most heavily defended airspace in Iran, directly over the capital, Tehran. This is a kill box saturated with advanced S-300 and the domestic Bavar 373 air defense systems. Inside this envelope, the Adir prosecuted and achieved the first confirmed air-to-air kill of a manned aircraft by an F-35 in history, downing an Iranian Yak-130. The key technological breakthrough that enabled this was not the jet's stealth alone, but the integration of specialized, stealth-compatible external fuel tanks. This fundamentally altered the geometry of power projection against Iran. Imagine a special forces team that can infiltrate a deep-seated fortress without needing a visible, slow-moving supply truck waiting for them outside, by eliminating the requirement for vulnerable, high-signature, aerial refueling tankers. Israel's operational autonomy increased exponentially. This action established for a moment a clean narrative of total air supremacy, a flawless tactical execution. And yet, at the very same time this was occurring, another event was unfolding in Iranian airspace, an event that renders this entire calculus of dominance obsolete. That event was an American F-15 fighter jet falling from the sky over Lavasan, northeast of Tehran, in the same contested airspace. This is the first powerful but that dismantles the victory narrative. Here is the official story. The Iranian air defense network, which President Trump himself had declared finished just days prior, was neutralized. Here is the ground truth. That same finished network had just registered a hard kill against a fourth-generation American fighter. This was not an anomaly. It is a function of doctrine. As analysis from the Critical Threats Project confirms, Iran's strategy, learned from past wars, is not a fragile, centralized system. It is a distributed, mobile, and concealable defense architecture. Systems like the Bavar 373 are designed to survive a first strike and remain lethal, hiding their most capable assets until they are needed. This brings us to the central, operational reality of this conflict. The F-35 can penetrate Tehran's airspace, and Iran's air defense can shoot down an F-15 in that same airspace. Both are true. This is not air supremacy. This is the geometry of a lethal, attritional stalemate. So, two major events on the same day. In your assessment, which data point carries more strategic weight for the conflict's future, the F-35 kill or the F-15 downing? Comment F-35 or F-15 below, and your reasoning. But a military stalemate, however costly, is a calculable risk. What is not calculable is a complete collapse of the strategic premise behind the operation itself. If the tactical outcome was a predictable stalemate, why was the mission greenlit at all? The answer reveals a far greater failure, not on the battlefield, but in the halls of power where the entire regime change fantasy was engineered, and that is where the real damage is found. That operational stalemate is made worse by the second and more decisive Beirut, a complete collapse of the political strategy underpinning the entire campaign. The mission was justified by a regime change plan built on a fatally flawed assumption. This wasn't just a flawed assumption, it was a catastrophic misreading of the Iranian social battle space. A misreading based on willfully ignoring observable data, the deep-seated memory of the Shah's Savak secret police, the nationalist revulsion towards any foreign installed leader, and a younger generation that has zero nostalgia for a monarchist past. They simply ignored the data points that made Reza Pahlavi radioactive on the ground. This isn't my assessment. This is the clinical finding of the Brookings Institution. Their March 2026 analysis noted the plan had little clarity, planning, readiness, and accountability. Critically, they warned that the powerful IRGC will not just melt away. That warning confirms this isn't about popular support, it's about institutional architecture. This is further validated by the regime's most ardent critics. Listen to Behruz Gamari Tabrizi, a professor of Near Eastern Studies at Princeton. Speaking on Democracy Now! In late March 2026, he stated it plainly. Reza Pahlavi is basically an Israeli-American project, not the organic preference of the Iranian people. An externally sponsored project is not a movement. Operationally, it translates into a figurehead with no local network, no intelligence value, and no legitimacy to govern. Even worse, the air campaign has produced the precise inverse of its intended effect. As Arash Himati, a professor of modern Iranian history at Dartmouth, wrote in a recent War on the Rocks column, the attacks have destroyed the space in which Iranians were struggling for social justice and civil liberties. He's correct. The very networks we claim to support, student organizers, nascent labor unions, women's rights activists, have been atomized. Airstrikes and a siege economy force an entire population into a pure survival calculus, which hands the regime a monopoly on security and order. The result? A longer conflict half-life, more regime cohesion in the face of an external enemy, and a guarantee of higher, protracted costs for any stabilizing force. This entire playbook is a direct, almost perfect repeat of a documented, back-tested strategic disaster. Iraq 2003. Reza Pahlavi is the new Ahmed Chalabi. But this is not simply history repeating itself. This is a fund manager ignoring a blown-up backtest. The Chalabi Iraq scenario is a known data point. It is a documented case study in mispricing political risk, where the fantasy of being greeted with flowers was priced into the initial operation, leading to a decade of insurgency and trillions in misallocated capital and blood. To run the same play with Pahlavi isn't an intelligence failure, it is strategic malpractice. It is a deliberate decision to disregard a known catastrophic risk variable in the operational matrix. With the primary military objective a stalemate and the primary political objective in ruins, the operation is now strategically insolvent. Let me be precise about that term. It means the costs, in munitions, in operational tempo, in the risk premium now being priced into every barrel of oil in the region, are compounding daily. Yet the asset this capital is being deployed to acquire, a stable, compliant, post-war Iran, has a near zero probability of ever being realized. This is a negative carry trade with unlimited downside. But a vacuum in strategy is never allowed to persist. Out of the ashes of this failed Plan A, a far more desperate and improvised
Plan B is now beginning to take shape.
And so, we arrive at the first operational, therefore, of this conflict. Because the primary regime change plan, the clean, top-down decapitation, is strategically insolvent. The only remaining vector is a messy, bottom-up fragmentation. This is Plan B. This is not a coherent strategy. It is an improvisation born from failure, a pivot to activating Kurdish and other ethnic factions inside Iran to foment civil war. The objective? Destabilize the regime from within, hoping it collapses under its own weight. And this is not strategic speculation. This is active policy. Reporting from sources like CNN and Reuters now confirms active CIA consultation with Iranian Kurdish militias, like the PDKI, to arm and fund operations inside Iran. The idea is gaining traction even within the Washington establishment. Hawkish think tanks are now openly asking if Iran can be fractured along ethnic lines. But this playbook is not new. It is a direct and chilling parallel to the aftermath of the 1991 Gulf War. Then, the US encouraged Shia and Kurdish Iraqis to take matters into their own hands, only to deny air cover and stand by as they were systematically massacred. This new plan doesn't just risk a repeat of that betrayal. It accepts a massive humanitarian catastrophe as a variable in its strategic equation. This is the definition of a desperate improvisation. And it is about to send a bill directly to you. The costs of proxy wars, sanctions, and regional chaos are not paid by think tanks. They are paid by the market. And we are about to calculate the exact price. These military and political failures are not abstract geopolitical chess moves. They are repricing global assets in real time. This is your investor briefing on the downstream costs. First, the operational threat to the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of the world's daily oil supply transits this choke point. With Brent crude already pushing past $80 a barrel, major energy analytics firms are now modeling a sustained conflict scenario at $100 to $150. This is not just a price spike. It's a fundamental repricing of transit risk. Expect tanker insurance war risk premiums to multiply and freight futures to follow. This is a direct tax on every energy-dependent sector, from airlines to heavy manufacturing, and it will manifest as widening credit spreads for any corporation with thin margins and high fuel exposure. The operational environment is also one of high attrition. This is proven by the resilience of Iranian distributed defenses, and it is forcing a complete recalibration of capital allocation within the defense industrial base. The Pentagon, according to defense procurement analysts, is already signaling a need to triple or even quadruple production of key munitions like Patriot and Tomahawk missiles, simply to backfill depleted stocks. The mechanism is simple. This procurement surge means larger fiscal deficits or painful reallocation from domestic spending. That puts direct upward pressure on treasury yields, crowding out private investment and pricing in future tax regimes. The narrow opportunity in specific defense contractors is therefore paid for by degrading the risk profile of long-duration sovereign debt and domestic cyclicals. For context on the scale of this liability, reference the Cato Institute's analysis of prior strategic improvisations. The long-tail costs of the Iraq and Libya operations range between $4 and $6 trillion. For negligible strategic gain, use that as your baseline. The true price of these failures is the multi-trillion-dollar fiscal overhang that follows, making persistent inflation not a risk, but a near certainty. This inevitable fiscal strain forces the central bank's hand. It guarantees a policy of financial repression to accommodate the debt, keeping real rates suppressed. The direct portfolio implication: Long-duration government bonds become a trap. Your recalibration must include a hard asset bias, commodities, inflation-linked securities, and key industrial real estate as a non-negotiable hedge against systemic currency debasement. So, let's synthesize. The information from this chaos is not philosophical. It is a price signal. The matrix recalibrates as follows: underweight long-duration sovereign debt and consumer discretionary exposed to fuel inputs. Overweight prime defense contractors with scalable production, key energy producers, and hard asset inflation hedges. The probability of a 15 to 20% drawdown in broad equity markets, driven by a stagflationary shock, has now moved from a tail risk to our base case scenario for the next 2 quarters. The mandate isn't not to panic. The mandate is to act on this ground truth before the rest of the market is forced to. Let's run the final synthesis using a simple logical framework: and, but, therefore. And the US and Israel achieved a spectacular telegenic tactical victory with the F-35 air-to-air kill over Tehran, a clear demonstration of technological overmatch. But that victory was immediately nullified by 2 ground truth realities: a resilient, distributed Iranian air defense that downed an F-15, and a politically bankrupt regime change strategy that was dead on arrival. Therefore, the net result is not strategic success. It is a desperate tactical improvisation that leads directly to predictable and severe economic consequences, sustained oil shocks, and rampant defense cost inflation. The core thesis is now undeniable. A single tactical win is being used to mask a profound strategic failure. The new risk matrix for this conflict is not about who wins a battle. It is about pricing in a prolonged grinding stalemate, the escalation of proxy conflicts, and sustained economic blowback. That is the ground truth official narratives will never admit. If you need clinical, data-driven analysis that helps you see past the official narratives and protect your capital, subscribe to this channel. We focus on the ground truth, because in these markets, it's the only thing that matters.